We are going to start with a very special guest. Minister Babu is going to join us for a keynote. Very excited to hear what you have to say, coming from Hyderabad, and sort of one of the centers of technology in India and in the world. So, Minister, thank you so much for joining us. And if I could ask you to come to the podium. I know that my team would appreciate it, and I would as well. Great. Thank you so much, Minister.
A very good afternoon to all. In fact, we welcome you to our city of Delhi, a beautiful city and capital of India. And many people are from India too. And we welcome the distinguished panelists, the eminent panelists who are sitting here to sit and discuss the course for better tomorrow. And I welcome the leaders of the industry and the delegates over here. And especially coming to the subject AI agents for better tomorrow. I wish to see that, where we stand today and where we would end up tomorrow is a point of discussion over here. We stand today at a fundamental inflection point in the history of governance. As a policymaker, I would like to mention few points because all the technocrats are sitting on all the eminent scientists maybe from physics or the maths may be sitting on the other side to develop AI into the next level. For decades, the digital revolution in the government was defined by transition from paper to portals and from physics cues to digital clicks. But today, we are witnessing the birth of the new paradigm. We are moving beyond generative AI that simply answers. We are moving from them to agentic AI that acts now. What I've been discussing with Mr. Srinivas just now. And for 30 years, our relationship with technology was a series of commands. We used to give commands and used to get the answers. We typed, we clicked, we prompted. We were the masters for the search bar. We used to, we were the masters. Nobody can say that. But I stand here today. I can see and everybody can see the search bar is dying. In its place, something more profound. Just now, Mrs. Srini was just telling about agency. Is just evolving. In the first era of our national building was defined by land, the second by the industry, and third is being defined, more elusive, the intelligence of the system. And the nation that leads this century are those that learn to treat intelligence not as a product, but as a form of a public infrastructure. The idea is no philosophical for our state of Telangana. It is the story of our everyday governance because it's IT driven state as we are known for. And I often say that artificial intelligence has 3 lives in the government. The first life is in the research labs. The second we take into in the policy papers. But the third, ultimately both of this combined together, how we are trying to affect that life that truly matters for each and everybody. How do we see it? Is that when AI meets the real challenges of our lives, when artificial intelligence meets the dust where we face, AI meets the drought, when it meets the monsoons, when it meets the markets of the living society. And this is where its legitimacy is earned, when it really counters this dust, drought, monsoons, and the markets. In Telangana, we see AI agents not as a tool. Here we would like to take them as a teammates. As the way the pilots rely on the co-pilots. Tomorrow, as our government here in Telangana also see that we rely on AI as co-governors, system that can predict a flood before the first cloud gathers over the Musi. Musi is our river in the midst of our city. Allocate resources before the crisis and deliver services before citizen ever need to ask. For example, if you take the agriculture, a small farmer, I hail from a very remote area and that too a rural place. A farmer in my place or in some other place from the rural area, when the climate is not environmental concept for them, it is right now a daily negotiation with uncertainty. So when we built our AI advisors, we did something unconventional. Right now we are planning to do it on the pilot stage. We asked farmers to train the system with us. The dialects, the soil wisdom, the lived patterns become the pattern of the model. This is where the governance comes into picture. To use the best of the technologies where you invent, produce, or do sitting in R&D, use best of your gray matter to come up with some products. Until unless we use and induce into our governance, there will be no end result. That's what we believe in. That is why our Telugu first AI can record land records, interpret satellite indicators, and compress the time between the climate event and an insurance settlement. So this saved lots of time, for our, government agencies as well as to the end user as a farmer. Our satellite-driven heat analysis no longer stops at mapping temperatures. They now shape zoning, green belts, and urban cooling strategies for Hyderabad, which we are planning to take up to the core by 2035. And across 33 districts in our state, our solar power edge computer nodes ensure that the government service and the climate remains operational when the grid fails. And this is also one of the novel things what the Telangana is the first state where we have implemented. Yet, I don't claim that these are examples for climax of our story. It's just a beginning. This is the preface we can say that. Because the real breakthrough is not from each project, it is from the architecture that binds together. Our future projects, like our coming up, the state-of-art infrastructure in the upcoming AI city, absolutely dedicated AI city, and the Bharat Future City, which shall be the net zero city, are designed not as a smart districts, either for technology or for other aspects, but as self-learning cities, territories that define sustainabilities, territories which can, provide themselves for the compute and make them policy advisors. Our country's first sovereign AI nerve center, ICOM. This is a first ever initiative by any state in India that we have come up with the first sovereign AI nerve center that is supposed to be the AI innovation hub that is named as ICOM. So that the aim and objective is, this intelligence be shall go deep beyond just for incubation, but also render into R&D and shall be the prime focus of creating AI ready talent for tomorrow's world. And I would like to mention here that Hyderabad and Telangana is the first state to come up with a platform that is Telangana Data Exchange Platform. The sovereign data open pipeline ensure that the intelligence is grounded in integrity. So the platform is on the open, and this is the first state we have put all the data on this platform. You know, if we go through it by this open data pipeline, 1084 data sets, they have moved from administrative exhaust to ecological signal. We have created something rare in the global south, that state that generates its own intelligence at a scale. And we have seen the results too. And results shown the healthcare doesn't wait for symptoms, it now anticipates risk, because the data exchange we have done with our co-partners, either in the healthcare or with the doctors or with the public health institutions. They are just not waiting for to deliver the medication, but predicting the risk and try to put it into actions. And we are not waiting for the heat waves to come. We are trying to analyze through the data and how we should place ourselves, and we are preparing corridors for the shade. And farmers also, we believe, using this AI technology, we don't want farmers to wait for the loss. They have to receive assurance before despair. And we are also planning that infrastructure doesn't wait to break. It has to whisper when it will fail. When all this, the cutting edge technologies, especially the AI, deployed with purpose, and AI agents offer government something rare in public life: the ability to act before harm, to prepare before shock, to protect before loss. And how resilient our infrastructure emerges, how safe the climate resilient cities take shape, and how our public services become anticipatory, humane, and trusted. And this is the future what we are imagining, and we're trying to put all our actions into stream. And it is this operating system we dreamt and we started running. And I believe the next chapter of the statecraft will not be written in the boardrooms of traditional power centers, but in the living laboratories of the global south, in the cities of Hyderabad. And the world can already see a preview of what an intelligent century of governance look like. Let us leave Bharat Mandapam today, here where this great convention is taking place, with a shared conviction that the tomorrow we are building is not just the smarter, it is braver. And the great caption goes, AI for everyone, AI for human welfare should be the theme. And also, I as a policy maker, you as a technology expert sitting over there, should aim and anticipate for it. I thank the organizers for giving me, a length of year to air my pitch on behalf of our state of Telangana. I would like to thank the Salesforce team, especially the team management who have invited me over here, for gracing this and having to see, all the best brains sitting over here, and the gray matter who would be doing much more for our welfare of our human being. Thank you very much.
Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate it. It is very exciting to hear what's happening in Hyderabad and Telangana. Let's kick our panel off. All right, so I am going to start with an icebreaker. Everyone gets 30 seconds to respond. This panel is about AI agents. So what would you say I'm going to start there and then go towards me. What would you say is the single biggest difference that you see between AI last year? We've been sitting here, we've been sitting here last year, and the AI agents that we are seeing it today. Saibal, could you kick us off?
So I think in my mind, the conversation has moved decisively towards agentic AI. We are no longer talking about, as honorable minister also said, about solving discrete problems or discrete searches. We are now looking at end-to-end AI-led execution of business processes or government processes. I think that's the single biggest change in thinking that has come up.
Professor Teacher?
To put this in context, I was involved in the International AI Safety Report, and we just had our panel on that a little while ago. And Professor Bengio was saying, the biggest change from 25 to 26 is the emergence of agentic AI. And, my perspective is its ability, not only to do the end-to-end, but to also act on behalf of people is really the big change.
Mike?
So I'm probably going to jump on the train here. What we were seeing last year was narrow agents able to solve specific problems. What we see now are agents that are able to abstract the problem, chain of thought reasoning, being able to take that and turn it into sequenced action and turn the multi-agent sort of systems level thinking. So it's the move from task specific to systems level is the big shift that I'm seeing.
And Srini?
Yeah, so I think for me, the big shift has been from co-pilot, human in the loop, to agents which can act and really provide value, business value. And that's been the big shift.
So let's talk about that value. Let's talk about AI agents as a force multiplier. I'm going to start here. This time, Srini, you lead engineering for one of the biggest platforms in the world. There's a lot of discussion about AI agents. Can you demystify this? What does that mean?
Yeah. So I think what does that mean? An agent, just like a human, first of all, an agent has to act. It says agency and it acts. That's the first big difference. And like any agent, it has to have a couple of things. It has to know a role. Just like a human, it needs to know what it's supposed to do, what is the jobs to be done. It needs knowledge. Just like a human, if I have in my mind, an agent has to have knowledge, some memory, so both short-term and long-term memory. And then it should also be able to act. It should be able to, the digital world should be able to act on an API or something. And then it should be able to act wherever the surface is. Maybe it's in WhatsApp channel, wherever the user is interacting with it, in a WhatsApp channel or web channel or a digital channel or a SMS text. Most important in all of this is we should have guardrails on what it's not supposed to do. That's the most important. And then all of it has to be covered to make it useful with what we call a trust layer, because these things can hallucinate. It can have bias. It can have toxicity. Avoid all of that. And they're unpredictable ultimately. So it should have governance. Then it's auditability. So you can do all of this. To do all of this is what an agent does. So this is also the why, even though there's a lot of hype, in reality, it hasn't diffused enough. This is the business value which we are trying to bridge as vendors.
Right, thank you. Saibal, I'm going to go to you next. So let's talk about governments. We sit here in Delhi, the capital of one of the greatest nations of the world. The public sector, are they ready for this? How do we think about that?
So I think, let me not answer that question. I think the public sector needs to be ready. Okay. So all the way from managing public finances, public procurement, managing their workflows and processes better, there is no way that public sector can avoid this. However, as Srini, you pointed out, the stakes here are very, very high. Okay. So imagine an agent crafting an RFP, a multi-million or $1 billion RFP on behalf of the government. Okay, how do we, and in public procurement, we often sacrifice speed for, procedural tightness. Okay, so how do we actually, what guardrails do we put around an agent or more? So can it really be end-to-end? Can it really be fully autonomous? Or do I still need that last human layer to make sure that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, because the stakes are really high, and
Right.
a mistake can really, lead to a lot of negative impact. So I think the public sector has to be ready, but I think some of these guardrails has to be thought through. And in the context of public sector, are agents fully autonomous, or do they still automate, or do they still operate with a little bit of, that human layer? I think that has to be thought through.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I love that you said RFPs because that's a concrete example. So let's talk a little bit about use cases. And Mike, I'm going to go to you. Let's talk about resilient infrastructure. One of the examples I hear a lot for AI agents, they can help you make reservations. And I love to eat. I think making restaurant reservation actually pretty valuable to me. But could an AI agent do something like design a bridge? Could it design an energy grid? Like, where do we stand between reality and science fiction?
Yeah, so I think we're tracking pretty quickly to agents being able to do just those kinds of things. In the past, what's been difficult is using computational methods in AI, which has been around for a reasonable time for these things, has been very difficult. It's because, if you're using some form of computational method or AI to design a bridge, you have to specify that bridge perfectly. You have to give it perfect inputs. Now, it turns out that when a designer is designing something, they don't have perfect inputs. That's the process of design, is actually figuring out what your inputs are, right? So this has always been a little bit of a barrier for people to use these advanced methods. With AI, and specifically AI agents, you've now got a much easier way of interacting. It's more forgiving towards fuzzy requirements and earlier stages of thinking. It's able to give you things that inspire you. So, one of the things I talk a lot about publicly is that the notion of agents and creatives working in a loop together, that it's sort of breaking the cycle where the engineer has to come up with every idea from scratch, from a blank canvas. Rather, describe what you're doing, let the agents explore. So I'll give you one example, specifically in infrastructure, because you wanted to get concrete. I mean, something that we work with is water systems, for example. So we've built AI agents that can analyze floodplains. They can analyze how you might want to think of water drainage and these kind of things. So every time you're making a decision early on in your design, you can let this thing run through, and it's going to optimize your design in order to ensure that drainage is going to be successful in that. Now, drainage seems like a small little side thing, but it's a pretty massive part of infrastructure, and having an agent handle that for you, it's a pretty big deal.
Mike, I have very close family ties to Louisiana, so drainage and flood zones, that is not a small thing. That is a very, very big thing. And actually, that's a perfect segue to the question I wanted to ask Srini. So one of the most complex things that a government might have to deal with is disaster response. Is that a place where AI agents could be helpful?
That's right. I really like the theme, welfare for all. And I think while we can think of very big things or where AI is doing, AI can add value right now. And disaster response is one good example. Another small example which I wanted to give was the key is to give back time to the people. That's very valuable. Giving back time is a very noble goal, in my opinion, to everybody. So we have this, we have a very interesting use case where there is a city in New Thames in UK where they created an agent called Bobby, where it's like Bobby is a UK term for policeman, and the citizens are asking a lot of questions which are not emergency, and Bobby is answering them. Okay, more than 90% of them, they get a lot of value. What was interesting for me was we have another city in Tasmania, which is using our product Agent Force to roll out agents to their police people, more than 1,000 police people, because a lot of times when they're in the field, the policemen new or more experienced, they have a lot of questions. And they're asking, and they call this agent Terry, and a lot of policemen say Terry is their best partner. They've been. So I think while we can think about futuristic ways, here and now, there are a lot of things we can provide right now with the technology guardrails in the public sector, in private sector, obviously, where if you have the right platform where you have trust, governance as a foundational value, with all the right guardrails, we can still add a lot of value. And we're seeing thousands of examples across public and private sector where you have the crawl, walk, run mode. You start something basic, you can still add value. You still have the most esoteric cases with multi-agent orchestrations. I feel like But you can start with basic today and still get a lot of value. That's what we are seeing.
That's great. So, Professor Tiedrich, we've talked a little bit about how agents can help governments serve their publics. Are there risks there? Are there a risk of over-reliance?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely risks, and I think I share the view of my co-panelists that I think there's a lot of benefits to using AI in government and improving government services worldwide. But like everything else, we have to do it cautiously and smartly. And I think some of it kind of comes back to the human factor, like pick your use cases wisely. One of the themes in the safety report is that AI is emerging very jaggedly. We have some use cases like computer programming that are really good. There are others that may not be quite ready for prime time. So I think when we think about over-reliance is thinking about where AI is excelling, focusing on those use cases, and maybe doing sandboxes around some of the others to give them a little bit more time to mature. I think also, the over-reliance, picking up on some of the great points, is the guardrails. One of the things in the safety report is good news. We've made a lot of progress on guardrails and risk management, but still, as the technology moves quickly, a lot more work to be done. So not relying too much that we overlook guardrails and thinking about where humans should be in the loop. And then the third thing I'll just mention is, the interoperability of different agents. And as agents start to call upon third-party agents, is just thinking through, what guardrails, how do you choose that? How do you allocate liability? How do you test the agents that you're going to bring into your system?
So guardrails have come up. Srini mentioned it. You just mentioned it. Let's talk about guardrails a little bit. So Srini, we hear about chatbots. We hear about hallucinations. Those can be annoying. When you're talking about a government deploying an AI system or AI agent, the consequences can be extremely significant. They can be a hallucinating government agent, can be quite dangerous. So let's talk about guardrails. How do you engineer trust into a system so that a minister or secretary feels confident that that's a tool that they can use to serve their people?
Yeah, so I think first of all, one of the first things we had to build, we realized that this is going to be an issue because these things can hallucinate, and that not only they're hallucinating, they're very confident hallucinators. Correct? So it's like, so that's the, so very, very confident liars, if you could look, you could say even that. I mean, hallucination is a better term. So I think one of the first things we have to build is this trust layer where everything, like it could happen in the prompt injection, like sometimes you write the prompt wrong, people could hack that. You could have bias creeping in. You have to red team it. You have to put toxicity, all of these guardrails. And one of the things we had to build is that layer. Even though the model providers, usually they don't have the liability. If they think like it's your problem, that's a model is what the model is. We inherently know it's a foundational technology. And one model was other, at some point you could switch it. But what the gap we saw, why can't we just roll out a model and suddenly everything works magically? It doesn't. You need this layer, this infrastructure layer, a trust infrastructure layer, which is very important. Couple of examples. So if you are giving loans, and if you ask the AI to just look at the current pattern of usage and decide a loan, the data it has seen may have inherent biases, and it reflects that. So you need to have mitigating circumstances to ensure that that bias doesn't leak in. So I think as the system has to put these guardrails, it has to, so the other thing is, as a regulator, if you take the loan example further, imagine you gave a loan to somebody or you rejected a loan. 6 months later, you want to check, if you want to test that it is what it has done, why it is rejected, you need the reasoning traces. On that point of time, what did the agent say? What was his assumptions? Because some of it is based on the data it's grounded in. So that's the context it has. You need that. So what we found is unless you have these tools, you take these specific examples. So in a government use case, today we have New York City public government today. What they're doing is for their benefits, they have an agent which is answering a lot of the questions for their constituents, and they are able to get 92% of the questions are being answered. But how do you know what is the proof that it's doing right. So we have to build something called a testing center, which you can validate that the answers are doing. So agents are think like they're like employees. You need to performance manage them. You know, they can drift, they can hallucinate. So you need a command center where you can say, all of it is, this is the difference between a pilot or a demo, which you can find thousands of demos in YouTube, versus real life, where these things become neutral. So we had to build all of these things for both the customers or governments to build confidence. They can audit, they can test, not even if themselves, an independent party also can test. All of this infrastructure is what is required to make this a reality. But once you do that, there is a huge value you can immediately provide to the either the customers or citizens.
Can I just add to that quickly? Because I think you hit a really interesting point at the end there. That, you know, when people talk about guardrails, they think of guardrails as this perfect thing, that at some point the guardrails are going to get strong enough that every result is perfect, it's completely predictable, and we're good. And I think we need to talk about the honesty of that. I mean, we're talking about systems that are inherently probabilistic systems. You're never going to make a probabilistic system 100% deterministic. It's anachronism, right? So what we've discovered is that, you do all the guardrails work that we're all talking about, but where you were going at the end there about making systems that can look at the accuracy of what's produced, give you some feedback on how accurate the solution or how well it's going to perform. And then, and this is very importantly, what we've discovered is giving control to the human being, giving control, in our case, to an engineer, right, who is able to say, oh, I get it. This is kind of, the result is produced is a little off. I'm going to give it some more feedback. I'm going to reassess the results. I'm going to run it again. Or I might even go in myself and kind of tweak that information. And what we've discovered when I'm talking to an engineer and explaining how this stuff works, if I don't give them that level of control, they don't trust the system. The minute they know they can actually control it. So it's not, trust doesn't depend on a perfect answer. Trust actually depends on transparency and understanding, and then the ability to come in and control something.
But I think that's also because the engineers understand that this is a tool. It's a tool for them to use to help them. It's not something that is going to take control. Exactly. Is there anything specifically with respect to infrastructure that you think government should be mindful of?
Yeah, well, look. So, I mean, infrastructure is not known as the easiest and quickest thing to build, right, in countries. And I think one of the really boring things, but absolutely necessary things with infrastructure is to make sure your digital ecosystem around that infrastructure is set. And I see a lot of places in the world getting into building infrastructure, trying to do this quickly without getting all that digital infrastructure in place. So, building information modeling, ensuring that every part of your infrastructure is correctly modeled, it's represented at the right level. AI is not going to just magically come in and solve a bunch of problems unless you've got a lot of that digital stuff in place already. So it's kind of a little bit of the boring work, but getting that stuff in place early is one of the biggest things. I mean, I've had a number of conversations here this week about the 2047 initiative in India, the amount of infrastructure that needs to be built in this country, and the importance of using something like building information modeling, getting standard data, getting that in place now. If you get that in place now, all this AI goodness, is way easier to deploy against it.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So I think I heard a lot of discussion around sovereignty, and I think the way we should think of sovereignty is two levels. There is strategic sovereignty and technical sovereignty. By strategic sovereignty, I mean is like you get control on data, your governance policies, and your operational policies. That I think you can implement it right now and get value. And I think, and then on the technical one, where people want to control their entire supply chain from the chips and all, I would like for governments and public officials and policy officials to think it as two tracks. One takes longer and a lot of capital investment. Don't let the second track stop getting the benefit of the first track. So first track is easy. You can ensure that data doesn't leave your country. Your policy guardrails have control, human in the loop. It will still get a lot of benefits while you still want to continue on the second track. That would be my request to all the government.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, can I just make a quick build on what Mike said? And because I do a lot of my work in the public sector with governments, I think one of the biggest guardrails beyond policies is actually the skilling the upskilling. Like Mike, you said, it's a probabilistic system inherently, right? So you cannot expect it to give correct results all the time. There's nothing called a correct result. So the person who's actually using this, who's using the tool at the district level, at the state level, to make real government decisions, that person is not an AI engineer. That person needs to be upskilled and needs to be told what can be trusted and what requires that additional layer of check. So I think if agentic AI has to take off in public sector at scale, then that upskilling at various levels of the government on what can be trusted and what cannot be trusted is also a very, very big component.
Yes, I totally agree. Professor, I wanted to ask you, so, it feels so trite to say technology is moving really quickly, but in the last few years, I mean, AI is moving very, very quickly. We've talked a lot about guardrails. How should governments think about this? I mean, how are governments going to be able to keep up in terms of, setting government expectation, setting potentially regulation, and for a technology that is moving so quickly?
It's a hard one. I think AI has evolved into a global multidisciplinary field, and I think we need to bring the global community together. I think we need policymakers, lawyers talking with engineers, talking with sector specialists to really inform the policy in real time. I mean, I'm a big fan. I spent a year working at NIST, the U.S. National Institute of Standards and Technology, and we need to figure out how to do some of the guardrails, starting with the science, and then the science can inform, how to develop the standards, how to develop the evals, and then it becomes, a question. I mean, different countries have different views on whether we should regulate or not regulate. The U.S. has a very deregulatory approach. Europe is the opposite. But if we can kind of agree on what those common standards are for evaluation and testing, then governments can be free to decide, do we mandate this or not mandate that? And I think one important nuance to add to the mix, and this has been a theme of the conference, is, we have to, we want some standardization on these evaluation mechanisms. We have to recognize that we speak different languages. We have different cultural norms. So while we want to have standardization, we've got to be able to localize what the evaluation looks like, because what might be appropriate in one country isn't going to be appropriate in another country. So it's hard, but I think, starting with the science, the scientific report, I would point people to, building on that, working through the AC network, working through standards organizations and all these other initiatives to develop the evaluation, to build that evaluation ecosystem, and then regulations can kind of overlay on top of that as policymakers think appropriate for their jurisdictions.
But if I could ask a follow-up question to you or any of the panelists, I mean, I think one of the challenges there for companies is that it's really helpful for companies. I'll just speak for enterprise software companies that I represent. It's helpful to know what those government expectations are. Like, industry is looking for clarity and predictability, and then I know it's also a tremendous challenge for the governments to be able to move regulation or move the government expectations in line with that. But I'd welcome any of our panelists who's talking about, from an industry perspective, how do you think about operating in a world where the technology is moving more quickly than the regulation?
Should I take a shot at it? I mean, I see. Yeah. As a software provider, at Autodesk, we definitely deal with that, Victoria. We've had a couple of approaches. One, I mean, we're obviously got to stay on top of this all the time, working with governments, making this part of a conversation. I spend a good part of my year traveling around the world, talking to governments and trying to sort of help them understand what needs to happen, but also help us understand, like you said, what they're wanting. But the main problem is just the sheer variance. I mean, I mean, even within the United States, we have things between different state efforts, right? And then you get around the world, it just gets even more complicated. What we've tried to do is we've tried to run as far ahead of this as we can. So if there is a way that we can build in good controls right from the beginning, we actually build those controls to the maximum extent that we can, within reason, right? So what we've done is we found now that we've run, like, for example, I'll give you an example. In every AI feature we have in our software, we have something called a transparency card, which looks like a nutrition label on, like, food, but that nutrition label tells you what kind of model is behind it, what data was used to train it, what kind of level of control you have, what accuracy it has, any bias that we know about in the model, that kind of stuff. And it's a standard thing. So we rolled that out about a year ago, really to try and stay ahead of things. So if governments started asking for these things, well, we've got a transparency card. What's actually happened now is that there's a bunch of interest in that becoming part of a standard. So I'm not saying that really just to tout us, because I think other companies are doing great things in this space as well. You guys are doing a bunch of good stuff in this space too. I think this is an opportunity for us in industry to run ahead, to try and help define some of these things, because it is moving so fast. And maybe I shouldn't say this publicly, but the government doesn't always have the best answers, right? So, I mean, we can work with government to help them develop those answers and come up with good things, which helps us then, resist some of the complexity that's coming down the line.
Yeah, so one of the challenges in this is you can project it too much. It's an exponential curve. It's very hard to project. So I think sometimes it's learned by doing. I think the biggest thing the government can, all governments can do is the policy framework on how to update these standards. Today, usually it takes a long time, and so everybody is afraid, and then it takes even harder to change the standard. So then they try to solve everything, and when things are changing, and so I think the main thing policymakers could do is just like the feedback loop. If there is a way to improve the policy framework, because then you don't need to be afraid of getting everything right. You understand that, hey, you go with some basics, and as new data comes in, you can update it. And then I think that in engineering and product, we call this the product feedback loop and agile development. If we have something equivalent on that, then I think then everybody is clear, because we all want the right thing. I think there is no disconnect in the foundational thing. We want AI to help, correct, in a positive way to our net positive way to our entire community. And the regulatory framework in a changing technology, if the regulatory framework is able to change, if you can change that, then we are not afraid to say that we need to get everything right on the day one, and we can learn by doing it.
So agile regulation.
Yeah.
I have loved this panel. Unfortunately, we're coming to a close, so I'm going to ask each of you one final question. And Saibal, I'm going to start with you and then head this way. But if we were so fortunate to meet again in 3 years, so fortunate to meet in Delhi again in 3 years, looking back, what would you say is the one thing that you think would be the best way to determine whether or not we have succeeded in addressing some of these challenges? I know it's a big question, sorry, but I'm going to start with you.
So since we are in Delhi, I'll give the answer in the Indian context. I think as the primary theme, or one of the primary themes of this particular conference, is inclusivity. So for me, the success of AI, the true success of AI will be if a farmer could talk to a small language model powered tool in his or her own vernacular language and get practical advice on how to manage the crop, how to manage the cattle. And if that could be scaled up across the length and breadth of India, then I think that for me is the real win for AI.
That's a big win. I mean, that's a significant impact. Thank you. Great. Professor Dietrich?
Yeah, so I kind of coming back to the evaluation ecosystem, we've made a lot of progress over the last couple of years, but more work needs to be done. More countries, including the Global South, are launching ACs, AI Safety or Security Institutes, which is not hard regulation, binding regulation, but it's governments weighing in. And I think real progress 3 years from now, we have an active AC Institute that's sharing information, making real progress on evaluation techniques. And one of the commitments that came out of some of the companies yesterday is, also localizing that so everybody can benefit from that, global North, global South.
Thank you. Mike?
So earlier on, I spoke about infrastructure and physical infrastructure that is in countries. What I would hope to see is in a couple of years' time, we're actually seeing infrastructure genuinely get developed faster than it's ever been developed. Which is a really, really tough problem, making that happen in the physical world. So as a measure of AI truly doing this, that's an incredible measure. But on top of that, it needs to be doing that without compromising safety, without compromising it. It's not a big black box that nobody understands, right? So what I would love to see is not only is that infrastructure being developed faster, but the public is engaged with it. Engineers and people that are doing it feel comfortable with it. They feel secure. They feel fine signing off on that because they feel that this is reliable.
Thank you. Srini?
If AI is so revolutionary as we all assume, I would hope in 3 years, the bottom 50% income percentile, their per capita income has a measurable increase. That for me is real impact of this technology.
That's fantastic. I want to say thank you to all of our panelists. I want to say a special thank you to Srini and to Salesforce for bringing us all together here today. Thank you to our audience for joining us. A big round of applause for our panelists.